I have finally started reading because I've started taking ADHD meds and I'm coming out of maternity. And I've read about 4 or 5 books recently. I just read something that was very good. And I remember, I read Shaman Suleiman's book, which is called The Chain. It's a memoir about a very, very toxic, is too mild a word, comedian, and about kind of female solidarity and experiences which need to be better shared and understood. And I thought it was fantastic, so I really recommend it.
I would recommend Robert Douglas Fairhurst's Metamorphosis. Robert is a professor of English at Oxford. He and I judged the Booker Prize together a decade ago, more than a decade ago, I think. And a few years ago, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so he decided that he would read his way to coming to terms with that diagnosis. He is really clever, almost doesn't need saying. He's really funny. He's completely unself-pitying. He's incapable of self-pity. He goes through the most extraordinarily dangerous and difficult medical procedure. And he does the whole thing by reading to work out how he feels and perhaps how he could feel or should feel. And I mean, he and I have been friends for a long time. I cried quite a lot reading it. I think a regular person would probably also, but you would also find a kind of sense of inner joy. The metamorphosis that the title refers to is, of course, Kafka's Metamorphosis, the sense that a man wakes up and he no longer recognises his own body. I think it's both a beautiful book and an important book. And my other recommendation is that you should read Emily Wilson's translation of the Iliad. It's taken her a few years. Her Odyssey came out in, I think, 2017. I've lost track a bit. And this is just a really important companion piece. We always want Homer to be read, at least I do. So the fact that Emily produces these really readable, really muscular translations, it just makes it a better world for everybody who's not going to sit there and pick their way laboriously through the Greek.
One of my favourite books that I've read this year was as part of my role for the Wainwright Prize for nature writing, and I can heartily recommend The Golden Mole by Catherine Rundell. It's a beautiful, witty book which talks about several species on Earth that are endangered or at risk from extinction. And just the way of her writing, she really brings a sense of humour, dark humour I have to add, to quite a situation that would terrify us normally. But it's written so deftly, so cleverly, that she really inspires us to want to do more and to learn about these disappearing species.
One that I've read this year is an amazing writer called Benjamin Labatut. A few years ago, his book was called When We Cease to Understand the World, which is extraordinary. And this year he published a novel called The Maniac about Neumann, who was one of Oppenheimer's colleagues, but also a founder of computing. And it's a brilliant, brilliant book. I recommend that enormously.
It's a difficult one, but I think probably my favourite book that's had the most effect on me this year is Ultra Processed People. I really enjoyed reading it, and I think that there's a lot to learn there. That's in terms of a non-fiction book. Fiction, I'd say probably A Ladder to the Sky, which shed quite a lot of light on. I mean, I think it was definitely some satire in there, but it definitely seemed to shed a light on the literary world, and which I found quite interesting.
Yes, so my favourite thing I've read this year, I feel bad, I feel like it should be something academic. It's going to be Superman Smashes the Klan. Now, if you don't know this, so obviously a comic book, but it's based on a 1940s radio serial. One of my nerdy hobbies is 1940s radio, and that's nerdy. So there's a famous story that the Superman serials in the 1940s had this story which was all about the Ku Klux Klan. and they expose the Ku Klux Klan, their strange little rituals, and basically its whole thing is a scam just to take money off people. This was a big deal at the time. It turned the show into like an anti-racist show. 80 years later, they've turned it into a comic book. So it's all, you know, anti-racist and also about the immigrant experience as well.